16. Approximately 16 months have passed since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. 16 months since a virtual unknown, Volodymyr Zelensky, became one of the main protagonists in the international news. The Ukrainian president is already a symbol of Ukraine's resistance to the Kremlin's attacks. Zelensky has spent 16 months actively and passively appealing for help. Indeed, one of the keys to Ukraine's admirable resilience has been the continued supply of military equipment from the West. Well, in May, Kyiv took a step closer to the last of its major demands.
I welcome the historic decision of the United States and POTUS to support an international fighter jet coalition. This will greatly enhance our army in the sky. I count on discussing the practical implementation of this decision at the G7 summit in Hiroshima.
International coalition of fighter jets. Ukraine has been asking for them since the beginning of the invasion. Because being of Soviet heritage, Ukraine's air force is very limited. It also comprises a very small number of aircraft. So far, the Western contribution has been limited to some 30 MiG-29s from Poland and Slovakia, significant but totally insufficient in Kyiv's view. Zelensky has always insisted that they need the US-made F-16s, but Biden showed reluctance several times in supplying them. However, now something has changed. At the end of May in Hiroshima, at the G7 summit, the US president finally gave good news to the Ukrainian president.
That's why the United States continues to do all we can to strengthen Ukraine's ability to defend itself, including launching some new joint efforts with our partners to train Ukrainian pilots on fourth-generation fighter aircraft like the F-16.
Until now, the West considered that Ukraine did not need fighter jets to defend itself against Russia, yet now they have changed their minds. But hold on a minute, because obviously the F-16s are not going to arrive overnight. There are many questions that are still, excuse the pun, up in the air. Issues that will take at least a few months to resolve. So the question is, how has Ukraine's air force performed so far? What change might it make to the course of the war if Kyiv has an aircraft like the F-16? Where are the F-16s destined for the Ukrainian air force going to come from? Today we're going to answer these questions, but first, let's look at a bit of history.
I'm running out of Sams, Uncle Sam.
So far, the Ukrainian war can be divided into 4 phases. The first one corresponds to the first 2 months. Many of you will remember how, at the beginning, Russia quickly pounced on Kyiv in order to put an end to Zelensky's government. The Kremlin failed. It was more successful in the south and east of Ukraine, where its troops did make significant advances. The Russian Air Force dedicated itself to bombing the main Ukrainian defenses against air attacks, such as radars and some airfields. Fortunately for Kyiv, US intelligence did its job well and informed them hours in advance of the Russian attacks. This allowed Ukraine to disperse its equipment to minimize damage. It was a decisive move, as it was able to save planes, helicopters, and armed drones from the initial attacks of the invasion that were then used to attack the Russian columns, advancing confidently towards Kyiv. The long-awaited superiority of the Russian armed forces did not materialize on the ground. And to the surprise of almost everyone, neither did it arrive by air. Because, VisualPolitik viewers, entering the Ukrainian skies entails many additional risks for the Russians. And that is because air defense was key to the Soviet armed forces. This means that both Russia and Ukraine inherited large and strong air defense systems. In fact, Ukraine had the second highest density of such systems in all of Europe, probably second only to Russia. To this must be added MANPADS, man-portable air defense systems, such as Igla and Stinger, which the Ukrainians have managed to maintain in large numbers. All this caused more than significant losses for the Russian Air Force, and basically rendered Putin's hordes unable to take full control of the airspace. VisualPolitik viewers, at the start of its invasion, Russia failed to take out Ukraine's air defenses. That was a major blow to their plans. Subsequently, between April and August 2022, the Kremlin focused its offensive on the Donbass region. And then the third phase of the war began with the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the summer of 22. Kyiv's troops made significant advances until November with the support of its air force, the air force that Russia had failed to destroy. This meant that skirmishes between aircraft from both sides resumed. For its part, Russia increased its missile attacks on Ukraine. Nevertheless, up until the current Ukrainian counteroffensive, the war was at a complete stalemate between December and June. During this fourth phase, Russia has continued to gamble on depleting Ukraine's anti-aircraft resources with its missiles and drones, exhausting the so-called SAMs. For those of you who don't know, SAM is an acronym that stands for Surface-to-Air Missile. Ukraine had a veritable arsenal of Soviet-era SAMs that has been diminishing over the course of the war. And even if Western-supplied air defense systems arrive, it will take time to integrate them with the rest of Ukraine's equipment. For months, Zelensky had been demanding from the West the best of their inventories, Abrams tanks and Patriot missiles, one of the most sophisticated anti-aircraft defense systems in the world. He was unsuccessful for a while, but of course, if flying over Ukraine were less dangerous, Russia could achieve air superiority. Then virtually all chances of Ukraine recapturing its territory would vanish. So at this point, as we say on VisualPolitik, it was no sooner said than done.
U.S. to send Patriot missile systems and tanks to Ukraine faster than originally planned.
Well, after the Abrams, Leopards, and Patriots were obtained, Zelensky took up another of his big requests, the F-16 fighters. We have already told you that Biden has just given the green light for the training of Ukrainian pilots to begin for this type of aircraft. Even so, it was not so long ago that Biden himself denied that Ukraine needed F-16s. Look, for example, at this ABC News interview from back in February 2023.
Think he needs F-16s now?
No, he doesn't need F-16s now.
Is that a never?
Look, first of all, the idea that we know exactly what's going to be needed a year, 2, 3 from now, but there is no basis upon which there is a rationale, according to our military now, to provide F-16s.
But you're not ruling it out.
I am ruling it out for now.
And now more than one of you will be thinking, but let's see, Josh, if the war in Ukraine has been stalled for so many months, what the hell has happened for the White House to change its mind in just 3 months? Well, at the beginning of April, information was leaked from the Pentagon, indicating that the balance in the Ukrainian skies was about to break in favor of Russia. Check it out.
Ukraine may run out of air defenses by May, leaked Pentagon documents warn.
Since news of this kind began to circulate, opinions in the West were suddenly divided on what to do about it. Some argue that Ukraine needs more Patriot or NASAM-style air defenses that the United States and other countries were already supplying. But there has also been a growing number of those who believe there is an urgent need to provide Kyiv with fighter aircraft. And the question is, what exactly could the arrival of F-16s in Ukraine mean? Well, we're going to take a look at that right now.
Top Gun.
Summer has just begun, and Ukraine has not yet run out of air defenses thanks to the West. But Russian pressure continues. And if the SAM's surface-to-air missiles run out, Russian planes would have free rein to bomb Ukraine. And even if these weapons become scarce, Zelensky's government would have to choose between protecting cities, infrastructure, military bases, or troops deployed on the front lines. In theory, fighter jets could replace ground-based air defenses to shoot down enemy aircraft, drones, and cruise missiles. That is what Ukraine has been doing so far with its aircraft. However, all indications are that 16 months of conflict are beginning to take their toll on Ukraine, according to data provided by US General James Hecker.
Ukraine has lost 60 aircraft, taken down 70 in Russian invasion, Hecker says.
At first glance, one might think, well, that's not bad, is it? It doesn't seem that so many planes were lost, and it has shot down a lot more. Of course, the problem is that those 60 lost fighter jets equate to no less than 40% of Ukraine's pre-war air force. Ukraine has only about 80 aircraft left, compared to the nearly 500 that the Kremlin has allocated to this conflict. And hold on a minute, because in addition to overwhelming numerical superiority, Russian aircraft also have better radars and munitions with longer ranges. Now, since they have failed to eliminate Ukraine's air defenses, Russian aircraft are forced to fire missiles or drop bombs from a considerable distance, which greatly reduces their effectiveness. And don't forget that we are talking about Russian weapons here, but the Kremlin is also using armed drones. Many of the famous Iranian Shahed 136, which are killing 2 birds with 1 stone, the SAMs of Ukraine, and the economic capacity of Kyiv to cope with the war.
Iranian-made drones cost as little as $20,000 to make, but up to $500,000 to shoot down, a growing concern in Ukraine, report says.
Not to mention the Patriots. Launching just one of these missiles can cost up to $4 million. A real bargain. In fact, launching 40 Patriots can cost up to $160 million. That is crazy. As you can imagine, there is no economy that can withstand this rate of spending, unless of course you are Uncle Sam, so the option of using fighters to neutralize airstrikes seems quite reasonable. The problem with the Ukrainian Air Force is that their radars have become obsolete. Kyiv has Soviet-era MiG-29s and Su-27s, and Poland and Slovakia have given it more MiG-29s. But when the time comes, these aircraft do not have the capacity to cope with the Russian Air Force. Ukraine needs a new fleet. This is exactly where the F-16 comes to the fore. We're talking about the backbone of NATO's air forces for the last 40 years. Its arrival would complement Ukraine's anti-aircraft defenses, as it would bring them something new: mobility. Fighters can protect various targets by moving quickly over an area. In addition, due to the curvature of the Earth, aircraft radars can see flying objects at longer distances than ground-based radars. Added to this is the fact that F-16 radars have greater capacity than those of MiG-29 fighters. Training Ukrainian pilots for the F-16 will be no problem. Ukraine has more pilots than aircraft, so Kyiv has made up a list of up to 50 pilots who are already available to start training with the F-16. In this way, these pilots could be ready in a few months and be operational before the end of the year. Nevertheless, there are still some doubts. One is that F-16s need long and smooth runways to take off. Not surprisingly, over in the Kremlin, they know this too. Take a look.
Russia launches group missile strike on targets at Ukraine's military airfields.
An alternative would be to use scattered and improvised airfields. These could be more numerous and harder for the Russians to find, but naturally the runways would be shorter and rougher. Or in other words, much more dangerous. So it is true that Ukraine right now has a problem with runways, a fact that reinforces the argument of those who claim that what Ukraine needs is more artillery, armor, and SAMs, rather than fighter jets. Some also fear that providing the F-16 to Ukraine could lead to an escalation of the conflict. This has been ruled out by Biden himself, who assures that the F-16 will only serve to defend Ukraine, not to attack Russia.
I have a flat assurance from Zelensky that they will not use it to go on and move into Russian geographic territory. But wherever Russian troops are within Ukraine in the area, they would be able to do that.
Let's see. We're talking about an aircraft that has been operational since 1978, the same year that the movie Grease was released in theaters. So no, the F-16 is not exactly the latest aviation milestone, and it doesn't look like its arrival in Ukraine is going to unleash the nuclear apocalypse. Besides, the White House has been very clever. By using the G7 summit to make these announcements, Biden tied his allies to this decision. And this is where the international coalition of fighter jets comes in. What is it going to translate into? Well, watch this space.
Ukrainian Sky Shield.
The boost given by the United States to the fighter coalition is decisive insofar as Washington's okay is needed for the export of any F-16 fighters to Ukraine, even if those fighter jets currently belong to other countries. The coalition brings together several European countries, and although it has no official name yet, Zelensky has launched his own proposal. And hey, Marvel couldn't have done any better.
The Coalition of Fighter Jets, the meeting with the leaders of European countries. We discussed issues related to the start of training of Ukrainian pilots on F-16 and other types of aircraft. We agreed to continue working on an official decision to create the Ukrainian Sky Shield Coalition of combat aircraft. Volodymyr Zelensky.
By another type of aircraft, Zelensky probably means the Swedish Gripen. Sweden has about 100 at its disposal, but until it finally gets into NATO, it will not be able to get rid of any of them. Meanwhile, more than 4,600 F-16s have been built since production began in the 1970s. Some are still being built in South Carolina, and the US plans to keep its newest models operational for another 2 decades. But there are countries that plan to replace them as soon as the new F-35s arrive. So get used to news like this.
Netherlands likely to send F-16s to Ukraine after pilot training.
The Netherlands is one of the main drivers of the Ukrainian Sky Shield. So is the United Kingdom, but it does not have any F-16s. One option is for London to buy them from other countries and then give them to Ukraine. Be that as it may, providing F-16s is going to represent a major new economic challenge for the Allies. To give you an idea, these are the estimates offered by Colin Kahl, US Undersecretary of Defense Policy.
Estimates that over the long term, Ukraine would probably need 50 to 80 F-16s to replace their existing Air Force. If you did that with new F-16s, so say Block 70, 72s, that would cost $10 or $11 billion. If you did it with older Block 30 or 32 aircraft, and let's imagine you only did half, 36 of those, it would still cost $2 to $3 billion.
Then there are also other European countries that will be key to the Ukrainian Sky Shield. For example, all indications are that F-16 maintenance could be initially carried out in Poland and Romania, countries bordering Ukraine that already use this type of fighter. Romania has even gained special prominence in recent weeks. Take a look.
West eyes Romania as possible F-16 training site for Ukrainian pilots.
It should not be forgotten that both Poland and Romania are NATO member countries. The fact that the training and, above all, the maintenance of F-16s would be carried out on their territory means that, in theory, they will remain far from the range of Russian missiles, something that will surely not please the Kremlin. For the time being, Putin has already launched his usual threats.
Танки горят, несколько танков уничтожено, это в том числе леопарды. И вчера было то же самое. И вчера были леопарды. Они горят. Также будут гореть и F-16. Сомнений нет.
At the moment, it looks like Putin will be busier dealing with Prigozhin and the Wagners. Besides, there are quite a few months left before we will see F-16s in Ukraine. Maybe they won't arrive until 2024. We'll see. But sending fighter jets sends Russia a serious message about the West's long-term commitment to Ukraine's defense. And now the questions are for you. Do you think the F-16s will be decisive in defeating Russia? And do you think that these fighters could provoke an escalation of the conflict? You can leave me your answers in the comments. In the meantime, don't forget that we have new videos every week. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like the video, like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, see you soon.